and welcome to this episode of Spotlight on Policy. My name is Stephanie Witt, and I'm the director of the Public Policy Center at Boise State University. We're here in our first snowy day of winter in Boise to discuss a white paper that the Public Policy Center has recently published called That Could Be Me, an analysis of the new face of poverty in Idaho. Most of us think of the snow as a time to go play and ski, but as we get into the depths of winter and the cold temperatures, this white paper reminds us that many more Idahoans than ever before are facing issues related to poverty, whether it's finding adequate nutrition, keeping their houses warm, or even having a house at all to live in. In this white paper, we'll examine those issues of poverty by first visiting with John Hess from Boise State Radio, who will tell us a little bit about how they came up with the idea for the series of stories and the people they met as they created the stories.
Well, we started this project. We received an email from the Center for Media Engagement in Washington, D.C., telling us that there was grant money that was associated with the federal stimulus for public broadcasting organizations throughout the country to produce what we'd call very quick, real-time documentaries and radio documentaries about what was happening with the economy throughout the country. So what we decided to do, and this was in May of 2009, put together a quick grant proposal to the Center for Media Engagement to put together a proposal to fund a series called That Could Be Me, which really was an examination of how the Idaho economy was faring, going from probably maybe the fourth fastest growing economy one quarter to the fourth worst economy 6 months later. How were people dealing with the economic crisis if there wasn't much of a social safety net from the government standpoint to begin with? How were people coping with falling through the cracks? How were they coping with loss of health care, loss of jobs? And then finally, what was the large overall bearing or impression that it was having on young people growing up in situations of poverty? So that's kind of what we came to and what we decided to do. The new staff got together. They interviewed some people out in the community initially to get some ideas about what stories to pursue. And then it really was a process of the new staff getting together and talking about specifically how they were going about to do this and what specific stories were they going to pursue. Our thought process was always that we wanted to do this over the course of 1 week. With long-form stories in Morning Edition, and then to follow up that with a roundtable discussion that would be the day after all the leaders who were going to be there to hear what the stories were. We also had our reporters involved so they could talk about what they found sort of behind the scenes, and we wanted to come up with a list of recommendations that we could present to legislators in January at the January 2010 legislative session. A white paper was produced by the Public Policy Center, and the white paper will be presented to legislators in January 2010. Well, I think what surprised me the most was that people are so very resourceful. They pulled together in many ways. They lived with other families. They, in some cases, lived in motorhomes. In other cases, they, for instance, used public assistance, but also nonprofit community assistance like the Salvation Army and things like that to a higher degree than we really thought possible. In fact, what some of these agencies were telling us was that many of their, when they would have clothes available once a month, they would sell out in 1 day, whereas normally they were selling out in 15 days. When they had school supplies available, because we did this around the school season starting up, and those school supplies literally went in hours. And so I think what we didn't realize was the extent that people were hurting in the community in terms of surviving economically. Well, I think we all said to ourselves, that's how we got the title of the series, That Could Be Me. After the reporters initially went out and talked to everybody, and we talked to folks we brought them in for roundtable discussions, brown bag lunches here at the station, we really came to the realization that everyone pretty much if you're working, you're one step away from that type of poverty level. No matter how much we feel like we're insulated from it, really the people that we stand shoulder to shoulder in the grocery line are the folks that are affected by this. And that's why the community should care so much about it, because really it's a reflection of ourselves back to the community. And it's not just the government's problem, it's not just the private sector's problem, it's not just the nonprofit community's problem, it's really all of our concern, and we all have to take an active role in helping to solve the problem.
Great.
Did set up a website where we solicited feedback from listeners, and also listeners could go to, we listed different organizations on the site that they could go to directly for help. And the feedback we got from the listeners was really very valuable for us. What we got from them was that many times a journalist's role is to be sort of the passive observer, just to show the story or present the story and let the chips fall where they may. What we got from our listeners was that they were really grateful that we went to such an in-depth measure to really tell these stories, that we really moved away from all the verbal clutter that there is out there about, what political side are you of an issue, or whether it's good or bad or whatever it is. But we sort of pushed away from all that and really got down to the human stories. And the feedback we got there was that people were very, very grateful that we did something like this, because it opened their, well, in our case, opened their ears to really what was happening, to kind of break away from all that other clutter out there, and allow them to really understand an issue more fully.
You can find a copy of our full white paper at our website at sspa.boisestate.edu/Public Policy Center. You've been listening to Spotlight on Policy. Thanks for joining us.